All right. Hello, and welcome to Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. We're starting off today. This is the middle of July, and so today we'll take you at a spin around the center so you can see some of the animals that are here, the orphans and the injured animals that are here healing at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. So welcome. My name is Dan. I'm the veterinarian for the facility, Dr. Dan Famini. And so we're starting off here, taking a peek at one of our youngest orphans, juvenile western gray squirrel. And so right now at the center, we do have lots of animals. So we have about 160 animals on site. Most of the animals in our care right now are in that mid-age. So as we spin around the center, you'll see that we have a lot of teenager-style age orphans, as well as a number of injured adults. It's been a pretty heavy injury year. Overall, we're on track for a pretty typical year so far. Kicking around in the 150s for our population is pretty usual for mid-July. And so we're in the middle of the gap in terms of our big orphan waves. And so we have a few teeny tiny bottle babies like this western gray squirrel on site, but largely we're in between the first summer wave and the second summer wave. And so we're just going to pan up to our other incubator, which has a few teeny tiny opossums. And so we're just starting to get the second wave of opossum babies trickling in. And so right now, of the numbers we have on site, the most numerous critter here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue is indeed raccoons. We have 45 raccoons healing with us right now. Opossums, when they come in, we can get them in big groups. This is just a trio that came in, but sometimes we'll get them by the dozen. And so we got about 30 opossums on site, which is the lowest number of opossums we had since the spring rush came in. And so these guys are just the beginning. We just get a little trickle right now, and then later in the month, or maybe in August, we'll get our second big wave of opossums coming through. And so we happen to have all different sizes on site today, and so we'll be able to spin around and take a look at the whole crew. And so we're starting out here in the nursery, and then we'll be moving on to the other outside enclosures, stop by, take a peek at our raptor area, and then we'll finish off looking at our aquatic animal enclosure, where we do have a trio of juvenile beavers as well as an otter. And so we'll take one more look at our slightly older opossums before we head out of our nursery area. Hi, fellows. And so these are ones that no longer need the thermal support of the incubator, but still need a lot of care. And so like I said, we got all stages hanging out with us right now. And so we have had a number of unusual parasites coming through. So for our older individuals, we are now doing a 1-week quarantine before we put them into our larger outside enclosures. And so we'll swing by our isolation wing so you can see what that looks like, and we'll go over some of the cases that are hanging out there right now. And so I see we have quite a few people who've joined us. So hello, once again, my name is Dan, Dr. Dan Famini, the veterinarian for the facility here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. And so just another summer, the number of animals keep on coming in. And so please do feel free to ask us anything. Go ahead and ask those questions as they come to you. And so what we're going to do from here is we're just going to poke our heads out to our next stage in terms of the development of these animals. And so those orphans that you saw so far, those orphans that you saw so far, they are just orphans, and it was just a tragedy in and of itself, but luckily there isn't any complicating ongoing health issues with them. As we stroll through some of the other areas, we'll mention some of the other maladies and injuries that we've been dealing with, including, if you saw the photo from earlier today, we have not one, but 2 raccoons that had eyes that were completely ruptured. And so we had to go ahead and I surgically removed one eye from each raccoon. Now, raccoons can certainly get along with one eye. If they had neither eye, that would be a problem for the species. But we'll take a look. Those 2 are actually cuddling together in their isolation enclosures. They heal up. And so we just went through our kitchen prep area. And so we're going to head out to an area which we also, and so the first room we looked in is called the hospital room. Now we're going to what we call the nursery. The name is a little bit shift from what most people would think of. Our nursery is not our tiniest neonates, but it's kind of our next stage up in terms of toddler age critters. And so we do have a few enclosures in here. And so we got another group of opossums slightly bigger, as well as squirrel and a group of skunks. And so we'll see. And so the opossum enclosure is getting cleaned right now. And so they may just be hanging out in, hey, yeah, we're going to take a look. So this is that next stage up. And so by this stage, they're old enough that we can put those ear tags in to keep them individually identified, so we can keep track of the weights and make sure everyone continues to thrive. And so from this age, they do hang out in this more secure, protected, but not incubator room as they continue to grow. The group of 10, we can have groups that are pretty big with opossums, and they will predictably do better compared to other species, where if we pack them in that tight, they don't always equally thrive. But luckily with these, opossums are doing just fine. So they're doing what opossums do, standing there and freezing and opening their mouths. It's about as threatening as they're going to get. And so this is the kind of the next stage up. So these were the tail end of the first wave, as opposed to those other babies you saw that are probably the leading edge of our second wave of opossums. And so we also have a squirrel and a skunks in here, but they are normal, healthy wildlife, and so they were not too keen at being seen, and so they're just fleeing from, and so they're not the best video folks, but they are excellent, healthy individuals. And so from here, we're going to swing around towards our isolation loop. And so, any questions popping up so far?
Just a couple of mornings.
Yes, welcome one and all. And so, for those of you who joined us, we're swinging through the Wildlife Center, so I can catch you up on everyone who's on site at the moment. Trying to think of cases that we featured before. If you guys have any questions or updates on any particular cases that we featured previously, please do speak up and let us know. All right, and our first question came in. What do we got?
Do you have any people fostering at home?
Do we have anyone fostering at home? We do have a handful of folks who are fostering at home. Absolutely, that is something that we'll do for patients that are stable. And so often will be bottle babies that will need that care. And if our handful of staff took on every single case, they'd burn out pretty quickly. So we are very grateful for our fosters who help us out on that front. So yes, we do have a few groups out in foster care. And so it takes a special person to foster, someone who's able to provide that provide that care without overly going in terms of affection, because we cannot have these animals become too desensitized towards the presence of humans. And so, but it does save those animals' lives. There's no two ways around it. All right, so this is our isolation wing. And so this is the area where we have very easily cleanable enclosures. And so now in here we happen to have a coyote. And so he's probably not going to come out. And so that coyote is here. It had some foxtails in its paws. It had some little abscesses in its toes. Those are healing up just fine. We actually have a handful of coyotes right now that are all in a juvenile age. So we'll see if any of them want to come out so you guys can see where they're at. This individual is still in our ISO because when we did our fecal check on it, just part of our routine intake evaluation, it was loaded with 3 different kinds of parasites. And so we've treated that. We're just going to wait a couple more days, run another fecal, and if it's clean, then he'll be free to join up in our larger outside area with the others. And so you want to hand me the keys real quick? And so that's one reason why an animal might be here in isolation. And so that's just a temporary issue that we'll resolve. We'll also put animals that have signs of our most concerning disease that we see commonly here in Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue, which is distemper. Now, we don't have any distemper cases, suspects at the moment, but that can manifest as neurologic disease, that can manifest as respiratory disease, or that can manifest as skin or other issues. And so I'll have you head on in first to take a peek at those 2 raccoons sitting in that nesting box. And so these are our 2 one-eyed individuals. They happen to each have a separate one is missing the left eye, one is missing the right. And so last Wednesday I performed the surgery to remove the ruptured remnants of the eye on each one. Neither one had an intact eye. They each had a partial eye. Both of these guys, when I first presented, actually had more than just that. they actually had massive abscesses with pus pouring from the skin all around the skull. And so exactly what caused these injuries, we can't know with certainty, but the shape of the wounds that were on them would be consistent with another larger raccoon having bit them on the face. That is certainly one very real possibility. One of the individuals did have some skull fractures, and so it's possible something else happened, like a very lucky hit by a car, just grazing, and so that certainly could have been a cause as well. Without being able to speak to them, we'll never know for sure. And so you can see that for the act of performing that surgery, we did have to shave the area around the eye. One of them came in a little bit more recently than the other, and so all that area at the top of the head is shaved because that was part of the abscess treatment. And so we do, treat the for abscesses. It is not unlike what you do if you have a cat that had an abscess, where you shave that up. You have to open up the abscess, you have to flush it out, and get them started on antibiotics and, if needed, pain meds as well. So these two are doing well. They're recovering pretty well. Once their incisions from the enucleation sites from the removal of the eye surgery is fully healed and we remove those sutures, then they'll be able to join larger groups of raccoons in some of our bigger enclosures. And so I saw I was reading through the questions. One was, can we check in on the beaver? So yes and no. The one beaver that we had before, that when we first started these live streams, that solo beaver, is actually back out in the wild. So that one we aren't able to check in on. However, we've gotten in not one, not two, but 3 juvenile beavers, a trio, since then. So we'll absolutely be able to check in on them. And so the question on why the ruptured raccoon eyes, so I believe I mentioned that since the question came in, so some sort of trauma, either bite, puncture, or something like being grazed by a car. Scrolling through the questions here, what happened to the mama opossum who is now outside since her babies are separated from her? Okay, so we actually have had a couple mama opossums who came in with 9 or 10 offspring on them. And so there was the one that we first started with a couple months ago. And so that was the one where we actually released all those babies back to the wild as part of that live stream, I think 3 weeks ago. And so that mom has completely healed, doing great, and is back out in the wild. There's another one that came in that I think we showed just last time, 2 weeks ago, that was in the hospital area at that time. And so those babies are doing fine. That mom was not thriving as well, so now that the babies are able to eat on their own, we've pulled them off of mom, and we're really increasing her nutritional capacity. I did a full exam on her yesterday. I am concerned about her vision in her one remaining eye, and so we're continuing to assess her. There wasn't any fractures or injuries to her skull, but there is some mild malalignment on her jaw, not from a fracture along the jaw, but at the joint, which is which doesn't give us as many treatment options. And so we're tweaking some things with her, seeing how she can do. So the answer is the first mama, the one that we really focused on in the beginning of the live streams, back out in the wild doing great. Our second mama, we're still watching, and the babies from both mamas are all doing great. And so here we have another couple raccoons that came in. And so let's see if we can just view those guys through the fence, maybe zoom in a little bit. And so these guys came in, they didn't have any overt, obvious problems or injuries, but because earlier in the season we had some strange parasites and even one bizarre bacterial infection that spread from some animals that came in to others when we put them together. And so we did lose a few individuals from that in the beginning of the season, back in April, May. And so now we are instituting a 1-week quarantine on any new intakes coming in before we put them with larger groups. So these guys are just waiting out that quarantine period, haven't seen any evidence of any episodes as of yet, and so they'll probably be joining similar age cohorts in just a matter of a couple days. And then we have 2 more spots here in our isolation wing. This enclosure is a little bit different. This enclosure is one that we can use for other species that are going to be more prone to escaping, things like otters if we needed to. And so right now we happen to have a coyote in here. This is a coyote that just came in, so I haven't done my full veterinary evaluation on it, but it was actually a confiscation case. It was from a couple counties north of us where it was just found tied up in someone's front yard. I don't know the full story, but Fish and Wildlife brought it by asking us to try to rehab it from there. It is a juvenile, and so like I said, haven't done my full intake yet. You guys are catching me at the beginning of my veterinary work week, and so I'll have an update on that one. next time. And then this enclosure, it had looked so vibrant and so verdant before. This is where those 3 beavers were, but they are out in the large aquatic enclosure now. And so this is just going to be ready to be cleaned out and moved on towards whoever the next inhabitants happen to be. So we will check in on those guys towards the end of the live stream. And so that's our isolation wing. And so here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue, we want you guys to know the full reality of wildlife rescue. So I'm not just showing the prettiest and nicest areas, but isolation enclosures are important. They just have that cement floor so that we can easily disinfect them. Once we are sure that we're safe in terms of the infectious component, then we do move our animals to more natural enclosures. And so let's take a peek now over here. This should be an opossum enclosure for and so we've seen kind of all ages of opossums coming through. And so, all right, well, there's plenty of food around. And so, looks like, but most opossums, when they hang out, they're just hanging out in the den box, especially this time of day. They'll be out more dawn and dusk. And so, let's see what we have. This should be the older group. Oh yeah, there we go. So we started off with those babies in the incubator. Then we saw the little ones still in our hospital area, but didn't need warmth. From there, we moved on to that group of 10 you just saw in what we call the nursery. And these guys are just a matter of weeks older, but that is all the difference. You can see how much more reactive, much more capable these guys are. And so these ones still need quite a bit of healing quite a bit of growing before they're ready to head out to the wild. But this is our next stage. And so for those of you who joined us since the beginning, our numbers here at the center are about 160 animals total. Right now, our big number 1 most common species is raccoons with 45 on site. But opossums could jump up in any minute as we have 30 at the moment. Got an 8 more this morning. Okay, so those probably have not hit the record system yet. Also, it's neck and neck. We got 45 opossums and now 45 raccoons and now 38 opossums. And so it'll just be back and forth until those opossums definitively take over with the second wave in about a month or so. And so we also do have almost a dozen, I think 11 foxes on site. So let's swing around right now and see if any of those foxes feel like being viewed. And so hopefully we've resolved, now that we have our microphone going on, we should have resolved the leaf crunching auditory issues of months past. And so we'll go slow there. And so this is one of our larger enclosures that's split down the middle. But we have all sorts of ramps in here. And so I do see one of the gray foxes up in that corner right there. Now, these are wild animals. These would be some of those teeny tiny babies we saw, say, 6 weeks ago that would have been in our hospital area, but now definitely growing and thriving. And so this is the gray fox, the native fox here in Sonoma County. They are one of the best climbers of the canid world. They are going to be incredible climbers. They don't actually need all this ramp structure. They could just go straight up the wall if they wanted. But we do use these enclosures for other species sometimes that do benefit from that. And so these guys are omnivores. They're going to eat a lot of protein, a lot of little rodents and whatnot, but they'll snack on grapes or in vineyards or other things that they can find. And so if you want to, let's see if, oh, nope, came up and down. One of the other foxes in the enclosure popped up and then jumped back down. And so we'll see if we can swing from the other angle and take a look at these guys. We're not going to get really close because they will take off from us as good, healthy wildlife should. But we'll see if we can get a better peek than that. And so great. While we will get hundreds of raccoons and opossums in every year, we will get a dozen or 2 dozen, or maybe at most 3 dozen foxes in over the course of the year. And so, am I being fooled by the fence? Yeah. There we go. Okay. All right, and so I don't know if if we head into the enclosure, these guys will probably hide and spook, so I want to avoid that stress on them. We might just open the door. Otherwise, we'll see if we can zoom in far enough. Oh, just scampered straight up that.
Will they get him?
All right, here, I'll try with my, oh, hey guys, that's my finger, how you doing? And trying to zoom, and hi guys. Oh, I'm just scrolling through messages. There we go. Oh, there we go, straight up that fence. You see that? No ramps at all, just straight up. So gray foxes are amazing with their climbing. And so gray foxes are one of the more common urban species here in Sonoma County, probably right after the opossums and the raccoons. Boop. There we go. And so these guys, they do adapt to our suburban environment pretty well. If you leave your pet food out overnight, they definitely will snack on it. And so foxes, in terms, if you see a little bit of feces around, especially there's some seeds in it, and it kind of has a tapering tip to it, that is often going to be gray fox poop. They are not bashful about their poop. They will just leave it laying around wherever, whenever. Let's see if I can get a better angle to view these guys. Woo-hoo. All right, well, we got a microphone. I guess maybe next time, if we keep going with these live streams, we should think about a fancy camera. But now they're called gray foxes. You can see that reddish fur all throughout on their belly and their ventrum. And that is, they'll have variable amount from just a bit of a belly of tan to all the way down the legs, but they are still our great gray foxes. And so they will dig into plants and looking for grubs, as well as looking for rodents. So you might find them evidence of them in your backyard. And so the other thing that'll just leave its poop everywhere and doesn't really care often is skunks. But skunks, as we saw a couple weeks ago, they're much smaller animals than the gray foxes. So the gray foxes will be about twice the size of the skunk. So you can kind of guess by the size of the feces, even though they're both pretty much omnivores. Skunks are doing more insect work than the foxes for sure, but you can see either way, versus the scat of something like a bobcat will be almost entirely made of fur. All right, I'm gonna stretch down our phone, hand it back to Kelsey here. So this is one of our larger enclosures, and so these foxes will be hanging out here for several weeks as they grow until they're big enough to think about heading out to the wild. One live stream that we hope to do in the future, in the weeks ahead, is when we have a number of animals that all need to go back to different places around the county, is we'll just do a live stream that's broken up throughout the day. In the morning, when we capture them all up, ready to head them back out, and then throughout the day as we get to the different spots where they are returning, we will send them back out. I can't believe I'm being outsmarted by a door again, and the same door no less. All right, I'm going to hand this off for a second. No, I still look like a fool. No way around it. There we go. All right, the door is conquered. Excellent there, Kelsey. I have no idea how I'm showing up on the screen here. This might be better. The next thing we'll swing by is going to be out towards some of our avian species. We do have some foxes in here, and this does bring up an important topic. Do you have the keys? All right. And so we'll see if we can pop in here. Now, this is going to be a larger group of foxes, and so this is a half dozen foxes on here. This is our traditional fox enclosure. It has some excellent hiding spots for them. There's one individual here who's not walking too well, and so I'm worried he has what we call hopping fox syndrome, which is a condition that's seen in Northern California. We have worked with 3 universities trying to get to the bottom of it, and it is still, in terms of what causes it, a undetermined disease, thought to be having an autoimmune component, because some animals will just heal from it. And so we'll pop in here. All right, thanks for coming into the cramped quarters of our double door system. And so these foxes, you can see, are a little bit older, and so you got them along that. And so foxes will, prefer to use that climbing capacity, and they will just hang out on as high an area as possible. They do have this giant enclosure they could be at any point, but they pretty predictably all hang out on that upper ramp, at least whenever they feel like there could be something of a sort of threat along the way. So we'll see and so my goal here is to walk until hopefully they start to move away from us. I'm going to see if any of them move in an atypical manner. And so we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up on that upper ramp. There's a 6th one in here somewhere. And so there you can see what we call the flight distance, how far you can get from an animal before it will turn him. Oh, there we go. That last one back here, this one that's furthest to the left, up high on the ramp. that one did have a halting gait to it. And so, yeah, we'll have to see how that guy does. So hopping fox syndrome, whenever you hear the word syndrome in medicine, that means there's a collection of symptoms, but we don't know the full etiology, the full disease process behind it. It is characterized by lymphadenopathy, which is a fancy word for enlarged lymph nodes. It's characterized by having lack of use of some of the limbs without any skeletal damage. When we have done necropsies, autopsies on individuals in the past, there wasn't clear nerve damage either. And so it is quite a mystery. And so with support, we've done trials of 3 different medications. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they don't. I've also had control groups where all we did was give them time. And usually the mild to moderate ones improve with time. The severe ones usually continue to decompensate. And so we'll see how this individual does. He's moderate at this stage, and we'll see which way he's going to head. We'll swing around a little bit to see if we can get any more shots of those critters in the corner. And so I'll have to check in. The more robust of this particular enclosure, maybe, there we go, there's that leap. Oh, yeah, so you're not going to, once it leaps, it's going to be too fast to catch the camera. If you just want to keep watching in the corner, as we head close, we might see them take that mighty jump. We'll see if any others have mobility issues. Here we go, leap. All right, and so they're too fast for the camera, but those 2 did just climb straight up the fence to the ramp, just on the other side there. All right, I'm gonna take 4 more steps, and then I'll hold it back. Leap, there we go. 2, 3, yep, there's that. You can see that, I see those back legs are kind of moving together at a hop as opposed to moving individually as they should. All right, so that's and so you can see that stiff gait there. All right, so we'll have to watch them over time. That is one of the great disease mysteries right now in our area, the hopping fox syndrome. And there'll be litter mates where we'll see one individual in a litter markedly affected and the rest are totally fine. And so there could be a genetic component. That part isn't clear. Could be what we call a storage disease component, where some proteins or other materials build up in cells till the cells don't function, although that wasn't found on the microscopic analysis of previous ones. So these guys will continue to support them, and so 5 of them are looking great, and that 6th one we'll just have to take with time. All right, so it's been a while since I checked in on questions. Do we have any others?
Several, yes.
Okay.
Let's see here. All the way back up in isolation, what parasite are you finding in the raccoons?
So there's not just one answer to that. We have had 3 or 4. There's been some unusual. There's been some unusual protozoa that we've seen. Some Sarcocystis and other things we don't usually see in raccoons. Of course, we see Balis ascaris, the roundworm of raccoons. That is very common. And then we also had some very unusual bacteria in a group of small raccoons that spread to a couple others back in the beginning of the season. And so it's not just one thing. If it's just one thing, if we consistently see one concern, then from the veterinary perspective, I have a straightforward response. We might, for that season, just start a treatment on intake. Just start to try to clear everything if we're seeing kind of an outbreak situation, the ones coming in. But we're not. We're seeing a variety of different things. And we're going for quarantine, and then anyone who becomes symptomatic, testing and working up from there. And so, do you know who's in the big flight?
I do not.
Well, this will be a surprise. I guess we'll see who's in the big flight, if there's anyone. So this is our large flight enclosure, 100 feet long. Other questions? Don't want to ignore all our people who are joining us.
Do you tend to nest on the ground or higher up in a tree?
So they'll go for whatever nook and cranny they find. Certainly we have found them nested down in low things, and we have found them nested up in branches and whatnot as well. And so from what I can tell, it'll be whatever's more appealing. I haven't seen a consistent trend on that front for opossums versus like with the foxes that always try to go high, but they do sleep in burrows. They will dig for where they sleep at night. And so I haven't seen one consistent answer on that.
Who is the most figure among your critters?
Skunks or foxes? Ooh, that is a good question. And so they both are very capable. And if we don't have, so we use what's called hardware cloth, which is a wire mesh that's lining the bottom of all our fox and skunk enclosures, a couple feet deep. Okay, this is a whitetail kite. It looks pretty stressy. So we won't. So, I mean, it's doing fine, but just from peeking in there, it was being pretty frantic going back and forth. So we don't want to. While I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with all of you guys out through the live stream, I'm not going to do anything that would risk the welfare of the patients as part of that. So let's head up to where we know. Everyone who's in there, we're going to head up to the Raptor Recovery Center as we go from here. So possums and foxes are definitely both very capable diggers. We tend to see the foxes dig bigger burrows quicker, but the skunks are certainly capable of digging just as well. And so way back when, a decade ago, we did have a couple foxes actually dig their way out of their enclosure. So I guess I'd give them the prize for that, where we never had that happen with a skunk. But if it was up for a bet, I'd say it'd be even money on either one.
Right. Are gray foxes a threat to domestic animals?
Gray fox is a threat to domestic animals. I can't imagine so. And so, I mean, they're only the size of a large house cat. And so certainly if you have an adverse interaction, raccoons and dogs and cats can fight, and that can be problematic. But gray foxes, I have a hard time seeing it be so, nor are they predictably bringing a disease that will affect your domestic animals either. With raccoons, we do worry about that, even if there's not a face-to-face interaction, that there would be the Balis ascaris left behind. And so certainly, I guess if you count chickens, foxes will go in the hen house, and so that could be a concern, but it wouldn't be for it shouldn't be for your dogs and cats under most circumstances.
Do you sedate the coyote before examination?
Do we sedate the coyote before examination? So it depends on what's going on, and it depends on the coyote. Coyotes are one of those species where once you have them in hand and cover their face to minimize stimulation, they're often quite tractable. There are individuals that are the exception, and so it depends on what we're trying to do. And so there's one coyote here with a broken leg, and so we sedated him for that initial splint placement. But I was able to just hold him for the purpose of the x-rays themselves. So, and so it will depend. Oh, we don't! Okay. All right, so, well, the only animal that's in the raptor hospital right now is actually a red shoulder hawk with a wing wrap because it has a fractured ulna. But we do have a couple juvenile red tails that I thought would be fun to take a peek at in here. We have plenty of raptors in at the moment. And so for coyotes, it depends on what's going on. We might give them a mild sedative if they're just a high-strung individual. We'll give them hefty sedatives if we have to do things that will be painful. But for a routine examination, not generally. And so I think we'll head down. We got a barn owl in here. We got some pigeons in there. Oh, a trio of barn owls. Let's see how these guys are doing. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. So we're staying nice and quiet so we don't spook them. There's our beautiful barn owls. And so the males tend to have lighter facial colorations. The females tend to be a bit darker. And so it looks like we might have one of each in here. The degree, like what color is the cutoff, will vary regionally. So those in this part of the state might be different than those at the top or bottom of California, let alone in other states. And so, all right. Oh, that graceful little hop. Okay. And so those are barn owls. I'm going to hand the camera back. And so those guys are doing well. Those are doing really well. And so we should have one enclosure here. I think it's number 4. Yes, it should have 3 different ages of juvenile hawks in it. And so these are red-tailed hawks, one of the 2 most common species of hawks we'll have around here. We have red tails and red shoulders. In terms of their niche in the environment, they both are, okay, we should be okay to pop our heads in. And so they should be, both are going to be kind of the kinds of hunters that will like be high on a telephone pole or something like that, and then they'll swoop down when they see, hi guys. And so now you might say these are red-tailed hawks. Look at those tails, those aren't red. This is the juvenile plumage. And so when they get their adult plumage that comes in, they'll get that characteristic red tail. And so these guys are, they're all juveniles, but they're going to be a few weeks apart in terms of their overall age. Hi guys. And so these guys, red tails, also tend to tolerate captivity much better than, say, red shoulders. Red shoulders are just a more high-strung bird. We do rehab both successfully routinely here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue, but the red tails adapt to the conditions for rehab smoother than the red shoulders do. And so I'm just going to poke in. And there's a question in terms of darting coyotes for examination or oral sedative. So actually, usually neither. If we do need to give them a sedative, I mean, we can consider oral. In some cases, that's appropriate. But usually, we would, rather than using a dart, and we do have an injection system, we do have a dart gun that we can use if need be. Rather than using a dart, what we'll tend to do is just use a syringe. So we'll actually capture the coyote by hand first, and then just give it an injection by syringe. And so that's what we do for the vast majority of species, even with our mountain lions. So if you go back and see our the one where we focus on the mountain lions, we'll get them into a squeeze cage or other capture area, and then just be able to syringe them safely. If there was a free-ranging mountain lion that was injured or some reason needed to be brought in for care, that's when we'd use the dart gun. But for most animals, by the time they're on site, and for bobcats, for coyotes, we do tend to capture by hand to bring them on site. It is very rare for me to use the darting equipment, but we have it if need be.
Do hawks eat live mice, or do you feed them dead rodents?
Gotcha. Do hawks eat live mice, or do we feed them dead rodents? So the vast majority of the rodents that we feed out here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue are frozen thawed rodents. If we have an individual where we need to test its capacity to hunt and catch prey before we're confident it's ready to go out in the wild, then in those situations we'll use live rodents. But that is definitely the exception rather than the rule. I'd say 98% of what we're feeding out. Because remember, a lot of these guys are going to be eating 3, 4, 5 mice a night. Is going to be frozen thawed rodents. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we'll wrap up here by swinging that aquatic animal enclosure. So we do have the 3 beavers and the otter who are all being co-housed in our aquatic animal area. Now, for those of you who were with us for the beaver way back when, that was the beaver that came in as a solo individual. It needed a lot of socialization to be able to eat and thrive. These guys came as a trio, so they were already socializing with each other. And so this trio is acting far more typical for beavers in that they don't really need us in terms of their behavior. And so they are going to be standoffish, which we're happy to see. That is healthy beaver behavior. But it is not going to be anything like the videos you saw before where we were in there petting them and handling them. That was needed for that individual because it was a solo individual and this is a social species. But it is simply not needed when they have other beavers to collaborate and cohabitate with. And so, all right, so let me get a flashlight on. So they do have access to outside, but they are choosing to be in their den box right now. And so, let's come on. Sorry, everyone. I just lost our mic. All right, there we go. And so we're going to zoom on in at our trio of beavers. And so these guys are doing just fine. And so they do go out and they do enjoy their water, just not routinely. Just not this time of day usually. And so they're eating wood, they're eating bark, they're doing absolutely great. And so these guys are still quite young. And so they were about 5 pounds when they came into us. I have to check their record, but I think they're up to 8 or so now. But normal weight on these guys when they're full-grown adults is going to be 40, 60. So these guys are still going to need to be rehabbing for many, many months. They're, of the animals that we care for, they have the longest horizon or rehab timeline. And so they don't have the greatest vision. They can see those really small eyes. They can see, of course, but they're going to use a lot of their other senses. And when they go underwater, they will often, their skull is shaped differently, so they can often swim with just their ears above the water and their eyes if they want to. Hi guys. And so you can see this, and so remember from the other beaver we had in here, it would be coming up for, when you handle it, it would, want that attention because we were the only other individuals interacted with. These guys have each other, which is great. And so that is really, they haven't stumbled in terms of their weight at all. They've been much more robust coming in as a group. All right. And so we won't let them be. And so in terms of what we feed them, we certainly do feed them plenty of vegetation, including a lot of branches that they can consume. We do feed them some rodent blocks. Oh, there they go. They might be joining us
Up to the wall
outside as we check the outside enclosure. All right, so thank you for stumbling along with us. Our facility is made for rehabilitating patients, not for having camera crew come through. All right, you want to go ahead and lead the way there. And so you can see that sod, we moved it from that isolation enclosure you saw earlier out here. Here they go. Hi, fellas. Oh my goodness, look at that. Excellent movement. And so these guys are doing so well. And so they are in that large pond already. They're swimming like champs. There they go, coming up. And so you can see that. And there's the otter in there already. Okay, so we're going to swing around to visualize everything as we come through. And so we'll just hang out here for a few minutes with the juvenile otter. Now, those of you who watched a few months ago, or a month or two ago, may remember that we had two baby otters that were with us. And so I am sorry to report that as those individuals matured, the problems did clearly emerge. And so when they were teeny tiny, eyes closed, ears closed bottle babies, their inability to use their body to move around and things like walk was not yet clear. But as they got to those stages where those things should have developed, they continually floundered and they did not mature. And so I did a deeper workup on them, and both of them had a condition called hydrocephalus that translates from the Latin medical roots to water brain. And so the brain was swollen because the fluid chamber in the middle of the brain was abnormally large, and that was fundamentally compromising their ability to be able to function. They had a couple other issues as well. We confirmed this through testing and then on necropsy. And so they were two closely related individuals, so it probably was birth defect, so to speak. And so unfortunately, shortly after the problems with those two became evident, this individual came in. This is actually a native from this otter that you see, this river otter, is from Sonoma County itself. He came in and has had no issues other than being an orphan. And so happily he's doing great. But that's why we have one otter in here, whereas you guys who go back and see the videos from a couple months ago would see those two teeny tiny babies. And so that is the tragedy and the bittersweet nature of wildlife rehab. Sometimes animals come in here, sometimes orphans are rejected by their parents because there is a fundamental issue. And so all three of the patients in here, all three of these orphans, have been problem-free and so far are doing great. And so for the moment, I will be calm and quiet for a few seconds so you guys can enjoy watching these guys with the sound of the babbling brook. And then if you have any other questions, let me know before we. And so I'll answer those questions before we tune out for this week's live cast. And as you can see, these guys will tolerate the presence of each other. We do have a separate den house for that otter, so he does not sleep in the same den house as those three beavers do, but they do share this aquatic enclosure together. We do have our second aquatic area that we're building, and so it wasn't together in time for these guys to be separate then, and it won't have as large a pool as this. So fortunately, these guys are going to continue to rehab here together. Otter will be here for a couple more months as it matures. The beavers will be here for many months. Any other questions come in?
Somebody asked if the beavers are litter mates, but I think you may have covered that, but I really don't know.
Okay, yeah, so the question in terms of are the beavers litter mates? Yes, we do believe so. We do believe this trio are 3 all litter mates. If I remember right, there was a farmer who killed. This was the otter is from here in Sonoma County. The beavers are from a county and a half away, and there was a farmer who killed that beaver and then found the offspring, and didn't have the heart to do that to those guys, and so they ended up in the rehab system. Oh, it's just so great watching these guys. So thank you all for joining us here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. Next week, watch the Facebook posts in terms of if we end up shifting our time or what we end up focusing on for another live stream. We will keep these up for at least a couple more weeks, and then come August, we'll wait and see if the live streams will keep on rolling or not. But for now, I will see you guys next week. I hope everyone stays safe, stay healthy, and thank you for joining us here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue.